Welcome, everybody, to our Empowering Minds webinar series. Thank you for joining us once again. We are so happy to have a special guest with us today talking about a very important topic, Kelly Capel, who is a mental health counselor. Welcome, Kelly, to the Empowering Minds team. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So today we're talking about a topic that hits home for a lot of us, on this webinar, and for a lot of us tuning in at home as well. Talking to friends and family about mental health awareness really presents an opportunity to provide some valuable information, support, and guidance, and even just learning about mental health awareness and understanding how someone could possibly be affected can allow you to really offer some help to other people. And I know this topic incorporates a lot of different levels and variances. So today we're going to try to focus on giving you some insight on like our own personal experiences with mental health, but also talk about the importance of sort of caring for and communicating with caregivers and children. So Kelly, I know you have tons of experience and you are directly, impacted by this where you're talking to people. So I definitely want to hear some of your insight on this, especially for the caregiver side. The caregivers are often neglected, unfortunately, right? They're the ones that are caring for those who have the mental health issues and things like that. How can we support our caregivers? How can we recognize that they need a break sometimes?
So it all comes with just making sure that your caregiver knows that what their resources are. I think is what it kind of boils down to. Having a support system is super important. Letting your caregivers know, whether that's in the capacity of, friends, social circles, through your like social events, just making sure that they know that you're there to support them. I think what is important as far as like recognizing the need is it's just like whenever we're, recognizing that our friend isn't doing, well that day. What are their signs? They're super tired all the time. They're angry. They may be not eating much. So you know how if someone gets sick, or if the family member has like surgery or something, you're dropping off those frozen meals for them to heat up. You're doing those little small things just to let them know, hey, we support you, we got your back. For caregivers, I think it's super important for them to again just know their resources. We have worked with NAMI, which is the National Alliance for Mental Illnesses. They have a ton of resources for caregivers, caregiver support groups, which I think is so essential for our caregivers to be surrounded by people that are doing the same thing and experiencing the same things that they are doing. I think it's important for our caregivers to know that they too have to take care of themselves. So they too have to get up and shower and eat and make sure that they're putting themselves first. And then I think boundary setting is so essential between the caregiver and the individual. You have to make sure that you set some boundaries and be pretty firm on those boundaries. One of the things that I was looking at was specifically with caregivers is perhaps just creating what they call a wellness recovery plan. So much like if you're working in mental health and you have someone who's suicidal, when you create a suicide plan, a wellness recovery plan is kind of the same thing. On that plan, you have a list of resources, a list of people that you can contact if you need help. Now, this resource plan is specifically for the individual that's suffering with the mental illness. So they can put on there what their triggers are. They can put on there kind of what happened, if they experienced that situation before and what they did to kind of calm themselves down or recover. But for caregivers, I think it's so essential for example, Jen, if I was stepping in to kind of give you a break, I could pass off that plan. It's actually a document or something I can email or text to you, so that you can have those same resources and you can know how to support the person that I'm caring for. So I just think it's important. Resources, I think is important. And then just for the caregiver to be able to recognize their own symptoms or when they kind of just need to just tap out for a moment and knowing that that's okay. Because I'm sure there's going to be some guilt behind that, but just knowing that it's okay to kind of just take a day and get yourself together as well.
Yeah, and I love that wellness recovery plan. I think that's a great idea. So that way they can have that sort of prepared and pass it on to somebody. So is there somebody do they have like a second person that they usually, I guess, say that this is who we can, pass on to when the caregiver needs a break? How does that actually work?
Yep, there's usually a support system. Now, I mean, of course, every situation is different. There may be a situation where, for instance, there's just like a mother and a son,
Right.
and she may just have friends or neighbors that just check in on her. But normally there's a support system, and in one of
Right.
those cases, if there is, someone that you don't have to call on, you don't have like a second person to contact, that's when it's important to get involved in those those support groups, and getting involved in the community so that you can meet people, meet individuals who are willing to kind of be your tag team partner on that.
Right.
But yes, it's usually just, family members that don't mind stepping in. And you have to be a little, I mean, sometimes you have to be, for example, I wouldn't want, my 16-year-old son, stepping in to do anything. If I need to run to the store or
Right.
something, all right, great. But you have to be a little bit weary of who you allow into that circle as well. You have to make sure that they know how to acknowledge, or know how to look at those triggers. They know how to call 911. I think that's something else that's important is, if there was an emergency going on, being able to call 911 and say, hey, I have someone here that suffers from a mental illness, and make that known
Right.
up front, so that nothing happens on the back end. So again, just having the support of
Right.
family, the support of friends, the support of neighbors, I think is essential.
Yeah, and I know, Jenny, Laura, both of you come from a place where you sort of have family members or friends where you have this experience of supporting others as well. And so you understand what Kelly's coming from in saying this, making sure that we have the support and we're supporting others, but also supporting yourselves, right?
Absolutely. I mean, to me, mental health is health. And I think there is like such still so much of a stigma when it comes to what it actually is, and people are afraid, and they may choose to suffer in silence because they fear that judgment, and that stigma, that's labeled and attached to it. And there's still cultures where it's shunned, where you're just kind of like outcasted, for admitting that, what, I think I have depression, for example. And it's seen as, oh, get over yourself, why are you being so selfish? And
Right. It's a cultural aspect where people don't want to believe in that and they just kind of put it to the side because they didn't grow up that way and they don't believe in it either. So they kind of think that it's not going to happen or it's not actually real. So, yeah, you're absolutely right.
and then some people think, oh, you're just sad, get over it. And I think it's so important to make it very clear that depression and sadness is not one and the same.
Hmm.
Sadness is temporary. It's a passing cloud. We know that it may hover a little bit, but it's like a visitor. It's going to come, it's going to go, like waves, right? They come and they go. But with depression, it's so heavy, it's so consuming, right? It's there, and it's almost as if you can't breathe. And so you're struggling, right? To kind of find your light, to find your way out of it. And it's very difficult too. It's very challenging, especially depending on the type of depression that you may have as well, because there are definitely different forms of it. Um, and so just to be aware of the differences, and to be able to make that distinction and say, you know what, this is very different, what I'm feeling. Like I really feel like I can't find my way out of it. But then there's like another view of depression too, that says, well, it's kind of like a temporary withdrawal, if you will, almost like a survival mechanism. It's like a different view where it's kind of forces you to go into this kind of isolated state temporarily so that you can rest, so that you can kind of regroup and collect yourself, and then like emerge, if you will, with a new aspect. So there's a different views of it too. It's kind of like,
Right.
okay, it's necessary, yet for you to go through at the time. But no, of course there are resources. There's like teletherapy, right? Which I think is so great now, that it's therapy is so much more convenient for
Yeah.
individuals.
You don't even have to leave your house, and you can do it in your convenience. You can do it where other people don't see you leaving the house to go to therapy. If maybe you're still embarrassed, like you said, because of that stigma that's attached to it. But you're bringing up great points. I think it's so important about the communication and making sure that you're communicating your feelings and letting people know what's actually happening. And that's definitely the first step, is making sure that you have that open line of communication with the caregivers and with your families and friends as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so like 1 in 5 people in the US have a mental health illness, right? And like you guys mentioned, there's a stigma with that. So with my personal experience, and I thank Kelly for this because she knows what, goes on in my life. So she has been an awesome foundation to help me with this stuff. But so I actually didn't even know depression existed, or no one ever talked about it until like I was in college. And then I finally, like, one of my friends from high school mentioned it to me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, where was I all this time when this happened, right? Because people aren't talking about it as much as they should. Then, like, fast forward so many years later, I have so many people, so many friends, people near and dear to me, close to me, that I love and care about so much, that have a mental health illness, that have depression, anxiety, trauma from their childhood, things like that, right? And so I never really considered myself like a caregiver, like I feel like I'm a strong person, right? So like I can take on a lot of things, or I feel like I can, but then there's only so much that I can, right? And sometimes like I don't know how to handle it because, like if one person is not feeling well, because their depression is taking over, and they think, or they feel like they can't even get out of bed for days, then who's left to absorb all the other responsibility, like that caregiver, right? Like, so like it's hard. So I'm glad that, we're having a conversation about it, to talk about like resources and things like that, because it does affect me, like I'm trying to learn how to be a better support system to these people in my life. I know that I cannot fix them. It's not my job to fix them. I can only be there for them. But I will let you guys know, like, honestly, I don't think I do a great job, because I also feel guilty, because I feel like I have a lack of understanding to what they're going through. I don't know what it's like.
I think that's normal to feel like that. I'm sure too. Yeah.
And I'm also guilty for Laura when you were saying like that, like it's just, it'll pass, or like wondering like, well, I'm so positive, like, can't you just be like that too? You know what I mean? Like, and that's not wrong, but it's not right either, So it's a very hard thing for me. So this is very hard for me to talk about. So
I think it's
all
open about it.
Yeah, thanks. And also, I want to say something else and now I can't remember. But okay, so also knowing, like, to what point, because I am also very patient, right? But like, to what point, like, how long should I wait until I have to be like, or say something different, or maybe push a little bit harder, because maybe these people don't want to go to counseling, or they're not ready to deal with things from the past that have caused them.
And I think that's a fine line too, that you have to sort of balance. And Kelly, you might know a little more about that, because you got to sort of be careful. You don't want to tip that person over the edge either. So you also have to sort of balance that fine line and making sure that they're getting the help they need, but at the time that they probably need it, because you don't know, how dangerous they might be to themselves or others, if that's even something that you can think about, or what their capacity, their mental being is, things like that. So there's a lot of different things to take into consideration before that person can actually reach out to help. So I totally understand where you're coming from, Jenny. And I'm glad that you're opening up about it, because like you said, when we were in high school, when we were younger, when people talked about like their feelings and saying that they felt depressed or that they felt sad, like, you never took it to heart at that point in time. Like, we're young, we're kids, we don't know what that means to us, right? And now as we're getting older and we're hearing this, and there's such a stigma attached to it, but it's so funny because there's Wellness Week in my kids' school now. So my 9-year-old daughter was actually reading something today where she has to announce in the morning about Wellness Week, about mental health awareness. And it's so crazy because I don't remember ever having to think about this when I was her age in school. Like, I didn't even know what mental health awareness was. And she's sitting here reading a paper to me about a courageous person. I think he was a basketball player who came out in public about having mental health issues. And she's going to talk about it tomorrow on the loudspeaker. And she's like, oh, mommy, this is what I'm reading today. And I was just floored. You know, I was floored at how the times are changing and how I'm so happy to see that it's being brought to light and people are becoming more aware of it. And our kids are learning more about it as well. So that's just a wonderful thing that's happening. You know, so I do think that's also a good thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think definitely to speak to both of your guys' points, you know, talking about stigmas, I think slowly but surely a lot of the stigma is just reducing. You know, over the past year, especially with everything, with COVID, everything that we've been going through, a lot of people are finally realizing, you know what, I can't fight this battle by myself. And Jenny, to speak to your point, you know, when do you know enough is enough, so to say? I think it's very important for caregivers to make sure they have relationships with the doctors, the psychiatrists, the therapists that, you know, their person is, you know, receiving help from, so that you can kind of know, okay, you know what, today might be a good day. You know, today I am actually going to push you. We're going to go for, you know, a gratitude walk today. You know, we're going to do something a little bit different.
So you love that gratitude walk.
I love gratitude walks. I talk about it all the time. Sorry.
It sounds so awesome. It sounds so calming and peaceful.
Yes. I have my kids do it. Okay, I won't go off on a tangent about that.
No,
but
we're gonna get back to that though.
We can get back to that. But having those, you know, it's all about having that alliance, you know, with the person that's actually suffering is important too. Allowing them the space to, you know, heal and to go through what they need to go through to get on the other side, but letting them know at all times that you're there, and you're there in the capacity to support them. You still love them. It's okay if you're having a bad day. I think that communication is super important. The way in which you encourage them is super important, and everybody doesn't do that the same way. My encouragement, for example, comes off as if I'm being a butthole. I'm okay with that, because sometimes I think you need that extra buttholeness, and I'm fine with that. Whereas Jenny, you're going to be so positive, Patty, and a little bit more gentler than I need. But guess what? Your family member might respond better to that, whereas mine will respond to mine, because we have that relationship. So it's just important, I think, to make sure that the roles are established. And I love to say, I will let you go through this, but you're not going to wallow in it. You can sit in it for a moment, but you're not going to wallow in it for too long. So just letting them know, you know, hey, all right, it's been day 5. Tell me what you need. What can I do for you today? Asking those open-ended questions to find out. Maybe they do just want to be left alone. Okay, you said that yesterday. Come up with something else today. Or can I suggest something? Can we try this? If it works, it works. If it don't, we'll try something else. Or maybe we won't try anything at all and actually leave you alone. Come up with different things. I'm telling you, the smallest thing. Hey, let's cook breakfast together. The smallest things that you would think like, oh, I got to go in here and cook breakfast again. Let me actually see if they want to do this with me today. You boil the eggs and I'll cook everything else. Damn, they're out of their room. They're not isolated. They're actually moving around a little bit. So just knowing your person, being open with them about what they need and about what you cook for them, I think is important.
And you know, I think it's also important. We're talking about caregivers, but parents are caregivers too. So your mom, a dad, a grandparent, whomever you are, you have impressionable kids under your watch, right? I know for me, there's just so much going on in like the news, in the media, in school. Like the kids said they had a lockdown drill the other day. There's just so much happening in their minds. You know, one of my questions to you guys is that how do we bridge that communication? Because with parents, how do we talk to our kids about this? Because we also have to make sure we're caring for the mental health of our children as well. So we need to make sure that all these issues that they're taking in, all these things that they're seeing on the news, maybe they're finding out in school, you know, all these different political issues, things like racism coming up in the media. How do we bridge that communication as parents? Because as parents, we're caregivers too, right?
Yeah, parents. That's you, ladies. I'm not a parent yet, so.
I like to start with books for sure. I always like to I'm always about information. So I'm always trying to get like literature, whenever I can find that's easy and more interactive to just explain things. And also I like to always point out it's a Mr. Rogers thing.
I love Mr. Right. I used to watch that show all the time. It's a
Really,
great analogy.
the helpers and the givers. You always point out who the helpers and the givers are. The people who, there's always good people. There's always good people trying to help, trying to do things, trying to advocate. That's what I always choose to point out. You know, it's kind of like, okay, well, this is a bad situation, yes, but what are we learning from this? You know, what is
Right.
the lesson here? What do you, how do you think we can improve this situation so that no one ever goes through this again, no one ever gets hurt like this again? How do you think they feel? It's such a great opportunity to talk about empathy, right? And
Right.
understanding and compassion, right? It's
Right.
like, what do you, how would you feel if this was happening, you know, right now to you, to me? That's how you want to talk to them about things, you know?
Yeah, and that's a good point about empathy. I know, like, one of the things that I do with my kids too is definitely practice, gratitude and forgiveness and try to. So you're right, it does present an opportunity for you to be open and honest with your children and just have that line of communication really open where you can just, openly speak with them about all these topics that are coming up. And I sit down and I tell my kids, I know you guys are seeing things in the media, maybe you're hearing things at school, but you got to come tell mommy if something's bothering you or if something makes you sad or angry, and I don't know that my parents did that with me growing up because
Nope.
like you said, that stigma, Laura, is always there. And I don't want to make that mistake with my own kids. I definitely want to make sure that I'm doing the opposite of that and that I'm talking to them openly and that they know they can come to me. So I think
Yeah.
it's really important that you let your kids know, listen, if something's happening, you're welcome to come and talk to me.
Yeah,
We
I definitely,
generational patterns. That's what we are doing. That's
yes.
what we are doing with our little ones. We are breaking those curtains. We're
Yes.
knocking down those walls. It ends with us. That's it. It ends with us.
Right. I
I
love
love
that.
that.
And the gratitude walk that Kelly was just talking about, that's all part of keeping our kids healthy. I love that. You got to tell us about that.
Yes, I will. So okay, well, we can do the gratitude walk first. So it's simply just going on a walk with the purpose of just pointing out things that you're thankful for. I like to do it with my kid clients. I had one kid client that I promise you he did the best gratitude walk ever. It's just allowing you, it's kind of one of those mindfulness activities, it's just allowing you to be in the here and the now, surrounding yourself. I'm thankful for the rain that I'm feeling on my face right now while I'm walking. I mean, one of my kids went into such detail. He said, my parents protect me. I don't know why it hit me on this walk, but I know why they treat me this way. It's because they're protecting me. I love that they protect me.
Oh,
And I was
wow.
like, well, let's talk about that. Like, I mean, it was just, I mean, we
So
were,
it
oh my
brought some
gosh.
self-awareness and it actually
Yes.
helps them
So
to open up. That's amazing.
it did. And it's one thing like, so in talking about personal experiences, I love the relationship that I have with my boys. So from the very start, I made sure that I let them know, kids are going to learn different things in school. Kids are going to learn different things from friends, in the neighborhood.
Right.
I always tell them, hey, if you don't understand something, come home and ask mommy about it.
Right.
I want to make sure that I'm giving them the correct narrative as
Right.
opposed to them hearing it from social media, from friends, from other people that may not, like, I am completely honest with my kids. I don't lie about anything. If they come to me and they
Exactly.
want to talk about some adult topics, I might water it down just a little bit, but I'm brutally honest with them about everything.
That's
So in
exactly
talking to them just about things that are happening, Laura, I absolutely love your idea about the books because I love bibliotherapy. So for the younger population or from the younger kids, pulling out a book that focuses on, sadness if they're experiencing that, or
Right.
racism if they're experiencing that. That way they can see it in a book. It's broken down into terminology that they understand, and you can have a conversation. With their older ones, again, don't let social media and society create the narrative. You be the
Yeah, that's a
person
tough
to
one.
speak to them about it. Yeah. So you got to make sure that you're asking those open-ended questions, not just saying, hey, are you sad today? What about
Right.
your day, made you sad? Give them a platform to be able to open up and to have
Right.
that conversation with you. And then do not be afraid to be vulnerable in front of them. It's one thing that I was most afraid about. I did not want my kids to see me cry. I did not want them to see me upset. I was superwoman mom full time every time they were in the room, and it got to be draining. And when we started talking about, like racism and the coronavirus and how it's hurting people, I broke down and cried. And it was like, for the first time, it was just like, wow, mommy's not like, the person that
She's
never,
not a
like they always used to
superwoman.
say.
Yeah.
So just being able to say, hey, this is upsetting to me. Mommy's heart is broken. People are dying. I am sad. I am angry. To be able to say that, it normalizes
because
it
then
for
they
them,
know
because
they're normal, and that
they look
they
up
can
to
feel the
you.
same thing.
Exactly.
Right, exactly.
If you just make it normal, and they are less afraid. My boys are less afraid to express themselves. So when we're talking about, you may have had a bad day, they can use words like, I got frustrated because this happened. Let me tell you why I got frustrated. Let me tell you how I handled that. Because that's how we do things. I don't want you to just come to me with something, come to me with the solution as well.
Right.
So just having that open communication, giving them some room to be able to talk. Sometimes as parents, we can kind of be like, a little hovering, or we can kind of be a little overbearing sometimes.
Just
but
a
giving
little.
them the room, giving them the room to talk, I might drop a conversation, just a random conversation, on my boys, and kind of just put them to bed and leave it with them. And then the next couple of days, I do what I call wellness checks, and I'll go in, hey, you remember we were talking about this specific situation? How are you feeling about that now? Any additional thoughts? Do you have any questions about it? Did you have any extra, time to think about?
Kelly, I gotta bring you over to my house, and I gotta
listen. I tell everybody that. Bring me your kids.
I mean, I'm loving your ideas here. I gotta bring you over to my house. Let you talk to my
it's
kids.
one thing that I absolutely love. I am here to be a parent. No other thing. I am here to be a parent. I love it.
Well, I think what's great is that you definitely have the both sides of the training of being the mental health counselor and the parent, and you're balancing it so well, and you're putting it all well together. So that's amazing, and I commend you for that. So that's great to hear. I love that you said that. One thing you brought up that stuck to me, and Jenny can probably talk a little bit about this. Social media is a huge impact today. My kids, Vishana just said to me she wants me to download Messenger for her on my phone. So I'm like, what is Kids Messenger? I'm like, what is this? I had no idea what it was, and I had to go up and look it up and make sure I was safe and careful. But there's so many different things that they can go on and just connect with their friends and on social media. And I think we have
filtering.
Yes, we have to monitor and filter. And Jenny, that's what I want to know. Like, how do we make sure as parents that we're monitoring and filtering social media? Sometimes it feels like it's so hard, because especially for teenagers, my kids are young. Kelly, your kids might be young too. Laura, same with you. So, but when they get to that age that they have their own phones and iPads and they're kind of stuck in their rooms, how do we know what they're doing? How do we know the influences that are impacting them? And, how do we have control over that? What do we do?
I'm sure you can have control until a certain point, right?
Right.
Because once they become older and they're locking themselves in a room, and if you don't have parental control, you don't have those mirroring apps where you can monitor their every move on their phones,
Right.
Like you don't know what they're doing. You just obviously have to pray or know that you did a good job in like communicating with them, right? As you're bringing them to be these awesome humans in the world. But I mean, while you can now, I guess there's so many ways that you can filter the access and the content that they're seeing on social media.
Right. So there are parental controls that you can put on there, and there are some things that you can do, filters and things like that.
Just like with us, with adults, you don't want to see creativity all the time. All right, you can, block them, snooze them, hide them, things like that.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's one of those situations. Sometimes it's out of control, and this is what leads to a lot of unfortunate situations. So it's good that you try to get ahead of it and talk to your kids about social media ahead of time, and try to let them know, how to use it wisely. Like we're going to understand they're going to want to be on social media either way. This is the time that we're in. This is the time that we live in, and they're going to want to be on there either way. So I think talking to them upfront about it is really important as well.
Yeah. Well, and then also I think Kelly mentioned in the beginning, also in general, knowing the signs of when people are going through something challenging in their life.
Yeah, we definitely have to recognize the signs. That's a great point, Jenny. And I think that's important that we give some of our listeners out there some of the tips about what are some of the signs that somebody can recognize if their child or adult, a brother, sister, mom, dad is maybe experiencing mental illness or depression or anxiety, or like Laura said, sadness, and there's different forms and variances. So what are we supposed to be looking out for?
And that's the thing. I think that it's just different for everybody. It's one of those when we're talking about our kids, know your kids. If he comes home, and he's super angry, give him the space to be angry, but then we need to have a conversation about it. And there's not an option to not have a conversation about it. Making sure that you're doing what I call the wellness check-ins. Check in. Don't be afraid to ask them about bullying and about, who they're conversing with, what those conversations are about. Yes, I 100% believe that as kids become teenagers, they get a little bit of autonomy. But guess what? I'm still mom, and I still need to make sure that you're safe. And even if that means safe from you, you just got to make sure you create a safe platform for them to be able to come and talk to you. I honestly don't know if there are any specific signs besides just watching them. Anger, becoming super sad and isolating yourself could be one. Becoming a little bit combative. When I've had sweet Susie here, and she's never done anything in her life, and now all of a sudden she's acting out in school or wearing, things that we normally don't approve of. We know that kids go through different phases and different changes, but just be aware
knowing the
of who
difference.
your children are talking to, what type of social circle they have. Making sure that they are, I think kind of what Jenny said, just making sure that you build that strong foundation for them and trust them enough to kind of go off of what you created for them, and giving them that space to come in and have a conversation when need be. I think a lot of times as parents and sometimes as caregivers, we walk on eggshells because we don't want to do anything to make them upset. We don't want to set off a ticking time bomb. Bobby's coming here and he's been angry for 4 days. I don't want to say anything to make him upset. Oh no, we're gonna make him upset, and you have to be okay with that. It's kind of just one of those, if you see someone, walking in traffic, are you gonna stop and try to help them out, or are you just gonna keep going by? You want to stop and help them out. And as parents and as caregivers, we always want to be that person that they can come to. So make yourself available. Make sure you have that safe space. And then just make sure that if there are signs, if there is something different, that your child or that your individual that's going through a mental illness, if you notice something different, don't be afraid to say something about it. Don't be afraid to gently ask the question. Or I like to say, hey, everybody's not good at verbal communication. Write that note, leave that sticky note in the bathroom and say, hey, I was just wondering, you've been acting this way. Just wanted to know if you wanted to talk about it. Nope, don't want to talk about it today. Okay, we'll try again tomorrow. And then another thing I think specifically with kids, because I think we were somewhere going along this topic, but just making sure that if there are weapons in the home, if there's access to them, make sure that you are keeping them locked up, making sure that the means for them to be able to harm themselves are locked up. Social media is brutal for kids. Like it is, oh my gosh, it is so horrible.
I'm so scared to have my kids grow up in this time with social media, and what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing and the times that we're in, it's so disgusting horrible. Sometimes it really is, and it scares me to the core to know that my kids are going to grow up with this. And like you said, we just have to do our best to set that foundation for them and build that trust and hope and pray that they believe in us enough to know that we're going to be there to protect them and that they're going to protect themselves as well. So we just really got to build that trust.
Yeah, I definitely think so.
Exactly what you were telling about, like, we are their home, we are their haven, right? So they need to know that they can always come to us with anything, with everything and anything, because giving them that outlet and that creative freedom, right, to speak their mind, if you will, those communication skills will be with them for life in any relationship. They won't be afraid to speak up and talk about what it is that they need and be understanding of their feelings and be able to be really clear with what it is that they need. I think all too often we think, oh, we should just be quiet just to keep the peace and all that, and no, just don't disturb, don't. But no, letting them know that this is where, here is where you can, this is a safe place. This is where you can share your fears, your hopes, everything.
Right.
And it's okay. And that in the future goes such a long way,
No,
Good point, yeah.
absolutely. And I know this is a huge topic to talk about, and there's a lot of different things that we can talk about, but I definitely think we covered a lot of good ground, a lot of valuable information. We want to make sure we're giving people, information. And if you do need help and support, if you do think that you are feeling, you have a mental health issue, or somebody a family, a friend, a loved one, anybody, or you have feelings of anxiety or sadness, depression, how do you reach out to get help? Kelly, what are some of the resources that people can look out for, or Laura, that we can, make sure that we're giving them some resources to look out for to get some help and support? Because that's one of the most important pieces here that we definitely want to end with, is making sure that we're providing resources for those who need it.
Right. Forward. Okay, so sorry. So as far as kids, I personally love commonsensemedia.org. That website has everything on there as far as like, Jennifer, you were asking about what games can I put on my kid's phone for them that's safe to play? How can I monitor? It has everything on there, from TV shows to movies, just a lot of great resources on there when it comes to books, social media, support that you might need. It just has some really, really great information on there. When it comes to caregivers, I would always go for the National Alliance on Mental Health, on mental illness. They have a helpline that you can call. You can also go to NAMI.org. But they also have a helpline that you can call. That number, Jennifer, is 800-950-NAMI. There is also another resource. I cannot think of it off the top of my head, and I did not write it down, but it's actually because everyone has their phones everywhere that they go. It's an app you can download on your phone. I promise you, I'm going to send you this resource. You can download it on your phone. You can open the app and you can choose to call, text, or have a FaceTime conversation with someone that can help you out like right away. No questions asked. There's like not any cost to it whatsoever. So like I think that's just a great resource to have, just because it's right there on your phone. And then of course, the National Suicide Hotline is always available. And even if you're not feeling, they have an option on there. They have an option on there where if you're feeling suicidal, or if you just need some support, that number 800-273-8255 is one that we kind of give out just in case you need that extra support. And then don't be afraid to make sure that you have, like I was saying earlier, the numbers of therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, doctors, have those numbers available, readily available as well, just in case you need some extra support.
Right.
Yeah.
I'd like to just adding to your resources, Kelly. I like Psychology Today, because then you could also find local therapists in your area that offer teletherapy through texting, face-to-face, online, various sources, and various ways, of actually conducting therapy, which is great. There's also SAMHSA as well, which is helpful. And if you're a student, like elementary, undergraduate, or even in college, there are resources in college resources. They provide free therapy. At my college, they provide free sessions to students. So use your resources to your advantage. There is help. There are resources. There are sources that they're willing to help you, and they will put you in contact or in connection with further resources if need be. Okay, so use your network. Be aware of what's around you. You never know. Somebody might know someone, right? And they may be able to just refer them to you. So you just never know how close information when you need it may be right there.
Right.
And with your work as well, because I know for my full-time job they offer sessions,
resources. Yes, they do. That's a good point. Yeah, they absolutely do. Yeah, thank you, ladies, for all those resources. And we'll definitely have an end screen where we'll just, make sure we have a listing of all the resources and important numbers as well. Jenny, any lasting thoughts, being from the caregiver side of it and making sure people are staying healthy and getting the help they need? Any lasting thoughts you want to let our viewers and listeners know today?
Well, first of all, I want to thank all of you ladies for the conversation today. I really appreciate hearing everything. It's pure value. The tips that I can take for my own personal journey. So thank you.
Thank you for being so strong, Jenny, first of all, and talking to us about your own personal journey. So that's wonderful. And you're amazing and inspirational that you came on and told us.
And it is great to know that I have support, and to utilize my resources. And also I read something recently in an article where it said, and it's good to know, that it is okay not to be okay.
Definitely so.
Yeah,
definitely.
It is. And I think a lot of us struggle with that. That is it okay to not be okay? And Kelly, you brought up that point earlier about with being around with your kids and showing them that fear, or showing them your sadness, or showing them something is wrong. So it's important. I love that you just said that, Jenny, that it's okay not to be okay. So, well, thank you, ladies, so much for all this value and this information. I think we're going to end on that it's okay not to be okay, and that you can keep living and being strong, and that's what we're here for. So thank you for joining us on the Empowering Minds Team webinar. Stay strong, stay healthy, and please, please get the help you need if you need that extra support.
Bye.